Welcome to NEK-TV Rocks. My guest today is Sybille Andersen, who is a midwife. What do you do?
Well, I help women who choose to have home births deliver at home, and in this state.
In Vermont?
Yes, I have a license in the state of Vermont to do so. We're regulated.
Yes, you are.
So we follow rules, of course, and I take care of them throughout the pregnancy, through the birth process as long as it takes, and the postpartum period, which generally is about 6 weeks postpartum. I visit that, and I do most of the care in their own home.
Yeah. When I was thinking about doing this show a couple of weeks ago, I'd said to a group of people, I introduced one of the other midwives to a group of people. We were just sitting around partying, actually. And they all looked blankly when I said she was a community midwife, that she did home deliveries. It had never crossed any of their minds that there were, quote, still home births.
Yes.
Which to me was just so strange, because obviously I'm not from around here, nor you, but I'm really not from around here, and where I come from, home births are still normal.
Well, two generations ago, that would have been the total norm.
Yeah.
Things changed a lot in the 1900s, or in the mid to late 1900s, but before that, everyone was born at home, pretty much.
That's right.
And still, most of the world, that's where most people are born. And, when you think about the population of the planet, the minority of us deliver in the hospital setting.
Right.
And
yet somehow we've medicalized the whole process of having a baby, of being pregnant, as though it's a disease as opposed to a perfectly natural and wonderful event.
Yeah, and that's like a whole other subject in itself, how the change came about in this country, the changeover from midwives who were generally unregulated, and then vulnerable to the growing medical field, and kind of lost their power or their autonomy from the greediness of many people who wanted to make money out of the deal.
The industrial medical complex.
Exactly.
That entity.
I wish I could explain the story well, but it's something that, there are a lot of books on it, about the history of midwifery and how that changed, involved. And since, maybe the 1970s or so, the 60s even, there's been a resurgence and coming back to the traditional way of giving birth and the natural way.
Yeah. So how do women who are either thinking about becoming pregnant or are pregnant and who want to know what their options are around delivery, how do they even find you or any other midwife?
Well, I think the main way that midwives potential clients are finding midwives is, first of all, by word of mouth, and then also the internet. The internet, you can Google midwives in the Northeast Kingdom, and you'll come up with my practice, and maybe the Vermont Midwives Association, and then there's a list of all the different midwives that belong to the association, and you can see where they're located, and that's how people start. Just one good thing about technology.
There's a lot of good things about technology. We can share information in ways we never could before.
Yeah, it's great.
And that's really powerful, because I know so many women who've had a horrible experience delivering in a healthcare institute because it's so impersonal, and who really would be interested in an alternative.
Yeah. I think that a lot of effort is being made, though, in the institutional setting to try to regain, some of that hominess. It doesn't happen all the time, but I think there's really been an effort to make women feel more at home if that's where they choose to deliver, and that some people are just not cut out for home birth.
Oh, absolutely.
And just like some people are not cut out for hospital birth. It's just where you're going to be most comfortable, and then the best results happen when a woman feels safe and secure in the place of her choosing with the people that she chooses to have as her assistants. And that's like 50% of the battle right there, So, yeah.
I think one of the questions that gets asked frequently is about, quote, the safety of home births, because women have been taught to be scared of it. which is the medicalization piece again.
Well, and that's because all I know is home birth and natural childbirth.
Yeah.
I don't know I never was trained in a hospital setting. I know when things can go wrong. I know the signs of when things might go wrong and when to move to the hospital. So I'm not afraid of that part because I feel like in my experience, although some things can happen in any setting, that could be a surprise. But in my experience, I feel like I've been well trained to detect any possible signs and symptoms before they become an emergency.
Right.
And so, kind of pride myself on the fact that I transport, not very often, but often enough that I wish I didn't have to, but I do because I don't want to threaten the life of the mother or the baby. And that always comes first. And that's, I guess, that's pretty much in a nutshell. But there's, there, like I said, no matter where you deliver, there can always be a problem. But
do the birthing centers around here let you stay with the mother?
Oh, you mean if I transport?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Well, that's
sure.
great.
Yeah. That's part of the contract I have with my clients is if we do transport to the hospital, I will never abandon them, we'll leave them alone. I then go with them to the hospital as their advocate, and like kind of become more like a doula, to the client then. And but yeah, I'd still take care of them postpartum too. They don't have to continue care with the physician or the nurse midwife that delivered or caught the baby. The mother delivers.
Yeah, exactly.
The attendant catches.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's true. You have the privilege of staying involved for 6 weeks afterwards. And
longer if if they want me to.
Which is nice.
Yeah.
And yet women who deliver in a hospital setting usually stay for the couple of days and then they're home on their own.
Yeah, I think
that's a big difference.
I think a lot of the attention ends up going towards the baby postpartum, but I don't work in that setting, so I might be somewhat wrong, but I get the impression that the midwives that do home births put a lot more attention into the postpartum care of the mother as well, and support, and making sure everything's going well emotionally for them with breastfeeding, or just their general life in general is going back into a normal pattern again, because it's difficult to have a new child and get used to that and adjust. So we're keeping an eye out for both, not just the baby. And I think in the culture, everyone's kind of more paying attention to the newborn child than the health and the well-being of the mother.
And hopefully there's beginning to be recognition again. I mean, we're sort of relearning what we knew decades ago, that it's really important to support a new mother. Otherwise, that impacts on the baby and way into the future.
Exactly. It makes an imprint.
Yeah, it really does.
And a woman who's felt satisfied with her birth experience, or from her prenatal care through her birth experience and her postpartum recovery, that woman will be much more confident in anything that she does. I think that giving birth is probably the biggest challenge any woman ever gets to experience. And if you feel that you did it on your terms, and you were proud of yourself in that the results, or it doesn't matter. Some people end up naturally having to have the cesarean, but if you feel satisfied with the care that was given to you and the way you were treated, the way you were talked to, that all makes a really big difference in a person's life from then on. So it's significant. That's what I hope to do, is to help women gain the confidence in so many other aspects of their life if they have what they want when they're pregnant and giving birth.
It makes sense. Yeah. And in some areas of the country, midwives provide gynecologic care to women. Well,
women care.
Exactly. Yeah. Is that something you provide here?
Not really. There's not really much of a request for it. I would if someone asked me, but that's not my expertise. Say, I feel like my niche is caring the mother during her pregnancy, the birth, and the postpartum care. I don't consider myself an expert on obstetrics and gynecological care, but there are midwives that will do things, but oftentimes if you do labs or tests, you're still going to need a physician to review it, to interpret
Right.
the results. So to me, I can draw blood, do pap smears, that kind of thing. But
Right.
it depends on, what the problem is, I guess, too. I have to limit it in some way.
Yeah. It's a lot to take on.
Yeah.
How many midwives, this is a weird question, how many midwives are there in Vermont?
Oh, I should know that number. I would say
Roughly.
there's maybe about 17 or 18
Wow,
of us,
that's
maybe
so
maybe
few.
more. Some midwives, some friends of mine, I used to live in Massachusetts, and I know some of my good midwife friends in Western Mass do service the southern part of Vermont. So, that out, not including them, I think, but I'm not really sure. One way to find out would be just to double check with the Department of Professional Regulations,
Yeah.
because we're all listed there. So those of us who are licensed. There are some midwives, I think, that practice that are not licensed, but they belong to certain cultural groups that
Yeah,
are not even watched.
right,
So,
exactly.
and then ends up the parents are the ones who say they did the birth.
Yeah. I mean, in some countries, you can be a registered nurse, state registered nurse,
Mhm.
and or a state certified midwife and practice in a hospital setting
Right.
or in the community.
Well,
Is
here-
that an option?
There are
here?
some midwives in the state that are nurse midwives as well as
Yeah.
CPMs. Like I am a certified professional
Mm.
midwife,
Right.
and they carry both titles, and they could have hospital privileges, and they obviously do home births as well. There's fewer of them,
Right.
and there's some I don't know because I wasn't able to go to the meeting. There was just a meeting this past week about the potential to try and allow for us to open up our own birth centers, but that's a while in the future if it even happens.
Mm.
Because in the state of New Hampshire, if I had the wherewithal and the funds to do so, I could have a birth center
Wow.
as a CPM, and that would be okay. But in the state of Vermont, it's not okay. From one state to another, the laws are different. In New York State, I'm a felon. Which kind of seems funny because...
That's bizarre.
Well, that's what happened in New York State. That's another story in itself, a history of
Mhm.
how certified professional midwives or direct entry midwives, they were at the time before the CPM even existed,
Mhm.
they were sort of pushed out of practice.
Sure.
It's a very long story, and nurse midwives now are the only ones, or the certified midwives that are graduated from the American College of Nurse Midwives. Only
Mhm.
those two types of midwives can do home births in New York State. Otherwise,
So they
you
do
could get
still have
arrested.
home births?
Yeah, they do some home births.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know they do home births in Pennsylvania, which is where we lived at one point.
Yeah.
But I think, again, it's
I think
probably
in-
the hospital.
I think in Pennsylvania now, though, I think CPMs can practice.
Yeah.
But it might have been difficult at one point. Then, that's the problem with everyone's misinterpretations of midwifery as it is that from one place to another, it's illegal, and then it is.
Isn't that
So
weird?
no wonder people are confused. It's just
Right.
So there is an effort to try to make it all, that states have similar credentialing processes and recognize the CPM, and and the educational process in order to get it has evolved as well. So those of us who helped create the CPM and the MEEK
Right.
accredited schools and all that stuff are now older, and all
Yeah.
the newer students are following a slightly different path. But
Right.
so it's almost like in some ways, some states are trying to even eliminate our being able to practice, even though we created the process
course,
to
of
accredit
course.
everything.
Yeah.
It's very confusing.
It's very challenging, and yes, it's confusing for you,
Mm.
but it's also really confusing for anybody who's considering
Yeah.
a home birth. The interesting thing to me is I see young women being much more aware of who they are as women
Mhm.
and claiming their own bodies as their own. Don't tell me what to do with
Mhm.
my body. You don't get to regulate it for me.
Mhm.
And
me.
I sort of see that as really positive for midwifery in the future.
Yes. I think there's a trend. I mean, the more it happens, the more people get educated about it in their immediate family and
Mhm.
friend circles, and then the word spreads, of course, word of mouth. But if you become exposed, if you know very well someone who's chosen to have a home birth,
Mhm.
that kind of opens your eyes to the fact that this is not
Yeah.
crazy.
Right. It can be a beautiful experience. It can be other
Absolutely.
people there. And I'm not suggesting it can be a video experience, which
Yeah.
I see sometimes happening in hospitals. But
Yeah.
that,
Well, there, people do video their births because it's a big event for them, you know,
Right.
and I understand that. And in many ways, that helps to educate, because when you think about 100 years ago, if you were someone living on a farm or in a rural community somewhere, your mother, your aunts would be delivering at home,
Mhm.
and you would be there maybe as the niece or the younger
just
sister
helping.
present at the birth and assisting.
Right.
Exactly. And seeing that, or seeing animals be born, all of those things show you the normalcy of it.
Right.
And that's an education in itself. Just visually observing a birth is a way to break the barrier
Mhm.
of fear, and you know, kind of reinforce confidence in the
Right.
process. And we are
Yeah.
all part of nature. We're all part of the planet.
That's exactly right. I grew up in a rural area and watched animals being born
Mhm.
from being very small.
Yeah.
And to me, it was perfectly natural. And it was
Yeah.
so strange when I realized not everybody saw it that way.
Yeah.
But apparently we don't.
No, and that's our culture, and you know, the media, films, television, everything is
Mhm.
interpreted or what is it, shown as a horror scene, or you know, sensational. You know, it's just, and the majority of births don't happen that way.
Right. Did you ever watch the show Call the Midwife?
Oh yeah, Call Midwife. It's still
Right.
on. Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people be more interested in home births since they saw that
Oh, that's
show.
a wonderful program. Yeah, it's based on true stories, and
It's
and-
based on my experience,
and they have
actually.
a very good sense of the difficulty it is, you know, that comes with being a midwife, and
Mhm.
the demand it makes, and the emotional what's it, commitment you make towards
Right.
people and their families, and it's just a really beautiful program. I think
Yeah.
everybody should see it.
I agree. It's also a slice of history
Uh-huh.
of the UK at a particular
Yes,
time,
yeah.
post-war Brit.
Mhm. And women's rights in
Yes.
the time of evolving things, and you know, the same problems happen then that happen now.
Right.
Um,
We just pretend they're different.
yeah.
Yeah. Are there other shows that you think can educate women towards looking at their options in a good way?
There are a couple of good films out there that have been made in the more recent past. Like there was The Business of Being Born. I don't know if you've ever heard of that.
Mm-mm.
Ricky Lake, who's a
I know who
talk show
Ricky Lake
person.
is,
Yeah,
yeah.
she had home birth herself in New York City, and after that experience, decided to do what she could to help the home birthing community, and created this fantastic documentary.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, and that was about, I think it was 2007 when that came out.
Huh.
There was a big surge in home births after that movie for that following year. It's kind of
Mhm.
interesting. But there are quite a few others. They don't come to my mind right offhand, but that's the one that stands out for me.
Yeah, you have children,
Mhm.
right? Did you have home births?
Yes, I did. That's why I got interested.
Ah.
And my father was a doctor, a general practitioner. He, you know, worked at first, I think when he first started helping his father, who was my grandfather,
Mhm.
in practice, he assisted at home births, because this was in was right after World War II and
Mhm.
before, or during and before, but I think he took over my grandfather's practice after the war.
Right.
And he would assist my grandfather, or vice versa, and then he took over the practice. But they did home births, but then everything kind of moved to the hospital setting. So
Mhm.
both of them each delivered over 3,000 babies
Hmm.
each. And most of them in the hospital. My father, most of it in
Yeah.
the hospital setting. But I don't know why, because I don't think that had an influence on why I chose a home birth. But where I was living at the time on Nantucket Island, there was the hospital, or if I was lucky to find a midwife, there was a home birth. And I went to visit the hospital. Believe me, it was a lot different then than it is now. But after my little tour, I realized that there was no way I was going to be able to deliver in this building
Yeah.
or in these rooms. And I walked out of the building and started crying. And I thought, okay, I'm finding a midwife. And I had to put an advertisement in a publication called Mothering. That was my one thought. I'll try to find a midwife that way. Those are earth-minded people, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
the readers of that publication. And I found a midwife thanks to that classified ad that I put out looking for a midwife end of July, beginning of August. And I had home birth with that same midwife twice. She came from the mainland.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So you really had to time it with weather because it's not always easy to get to Nantucket.
No, and then when I was practicing down there, I was doing births on Martha's Vineyard too, and there's definitely a technique that you learn as to how to get where. And after living on an island for 35 years, you learn fast. And yeah, there's boats, planes,
Mm-hmm.
and different ways of getting to the mainland if you have to do that, on boats, and then
Mm-hmm.
getting to the island. So it was a challenge. That was an art in itself.
I bet. 'Cause babies aren't always respectful of other people's time.
Yeah. And we had a technique, you know, of like, okay, you know, there's a 6 o'clock rule. You call me by 6 a.m. or call me by 6 p.m. so I know I can get on that last plane or last boat,
Mhm.
or, you know, get on the first boat or the first plane. So we had it worked out pretty well. Yeah.
We talk about transportation difficulties up here, but
Yeah.
we know nothing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that really is different.
Yeah, it was
How
an
many
experience.
babies have you delivered?
I think I've gotten up to 630 now.
Wow.
But you know, I have to admit that the majority of those were not home births. They were with my training.
Mhm.
I worked in birth center in El Paso, Texas,
Yeah.
for I think a total of 17 months full
Mhm.
time. I mean, this is like almost 7 days a week.
Wow.
You know, or 6 days a week. You know, 24-hour shifts or whatever. I mean, we lived there. We were,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and then when I first got my experience, you know, my training there, as a student, I returned there as a licensed, you know, Texas licensed midwife, because I knew on Nantucket I could never get the experience that I
Mhm.
needed to be a confident
Right.
and competent midwife. So I went back there as any time I could, you know, and we would cover for someone going on vacation,
Mhm.
or whatever. And it was just the most amazing experience of my life. Probably was my involvement with the women that, you know, run the birth center there, and the women that work there, and the women that delivered there. It was just wonderful.
It'd be wonderful if that could be replicated here.
Yeah, we just don't have the population base.
No.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, that's another problem with up here.
Do you ever think, did you ever think, because obviously you've committed to being here
Yeah.
at this point, did you ever think of going somewhere where you could have set up that kind of center or been involved with one?
I had thought about it, but I think that for myself and my husband, we were looking for a place that had to have space and beauty and proximity to family, that kind of thing, but
Mhm.
not too close, but at the same time, and also water.
And skiing.
Skiing. All those things kind of, and French-speaking people nearby, and all those things kind of pointed out, you know, to this area, and that's why we came. I mean, I obviously was not too familiar with the interest or the lack of interest there would be with home birth, but
Right.
I know that Vermont is a fairly, I guess with regards to volume of home births per population,
Mhm.
Vermont ranks up high in the top of the nation for popularity of home
Mhm.
birth. It's just that we have a small population.
Right.
So. But
Yeah.
it's
And I guess it is important to say you are bilingual,
yeah.
unlike
Yeah.
so many of us here.
And I do speak Spanish in the birth center pretty
Yeah,
all right. I can communicate.
that's important.
Yeah, that's why, I mean, El Paso you wouldn't have gotten half of the, what is it, the word for it? You couldn't get out of the experience half as much if you didn't speak Spanish.
Right.
So,
Yeah, that is really important up
Yeah.
here, to have that degree of fluency, to be able to truly communicate.
yeah,
Because so many women, when they go into the hospitals, have nobody to communicate with.
yeah. I don't know if that's an issue up here so
Yeah,
much. But
it's up here.
yeah, oh, for birthing mothers, I wouldn't know. But,
Oh, I heard
Yeah.
it said
oh, okay.
from a couple of women for whom actually their native language was French, but from another woman whose native language was Vietnamese.
Oh,
And
yeah.
communication at that point would have been a much better experience for
Oh,
her
sure.
if there had been somebody who was fluent.
Mhm.
And you are.
Well, in a few languages, in 2 languages. But
that counts.
Yeah.
If you could use something as a way of reaching other women, what would be your goal? I mean, how many women would you like to be able to be delivering each year?
Well, since you can't really expect a certain number, to
Right.
be exact every year, because you never know when someone's going
Right.
to get pregnant. So, I don't know. I kind of like the idea of there's off time and there's on time,
Mm.
because when I'm on call for someone, I'm on call
24/7.
well, for 6 weeks. I really can't go anywhere.
Right.
Up here, there's distances to travel, and I can't go visit family in Boston or that kind of thing. If I'm on call for somebody, it's just very
Right.
uncomfortable to be far away from my client at that point when they could be calling me at any point. So that takes up, you could just have a handful of clients all year long and still have most of your year caught up with being on call. So
That's a lot.
yeah, so I don't know. I don't want to be overwhelmed with clients either, because then I feel like for me, being much, I would think that kind of compromises care. I don't work with another midwife. I have assistants, but there's no other licensed midwife up here yet. So until someone comes and takes that place, then we can share the burden, maybe. You never know. Maybe not if she doesn't want to, but I just thought, I think that maybe a client a month would be like, okay, maybe
Sounds
almost.
wonderful.
Yeah. Or and then they overlap, so maybe just a little bit more spread out than that would be nice.
Do you do any outreach to educate women about their options?
I've tried up here presenting a film once, I think, on the biome, the internal biome,
Yeah.
but, things like that to, contact people to come to see films, or that film in particular, and, just with a handful of response, but that's kind of off the subject as well.
Yeah.
But, not really, I haven't done it yet, because it's really hard to find a place where it's central enough that people from, like my clients, even trying to organize a potluck is difficult, because they're, Westfield or Newark, or, it's like
yeah.
all over the place, or Craftsbury, or, just, it's hard to get everyone to be able to all come together and meet.
Yeah.
Because I thought, I used to do that a lot where I used to live, because everyone lived close enough together, and it was a great networking for them all, and great friendships were made
Mm-hmm.
when these families got together. That I know families that I've helped are still very close now. And their
Mhm.
children are in college, and
That's really cool.
yeah.
Yeah, that's another of the challenges of living somewhere that's remote and rural.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it just distance can be
And
challenging.
scheduling and people's workloads, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe somebody will come up with a solution for that.
Yeah,
Or
some central place.
maybe people will watch this and think, wouldn't that be fabulous in our community? And
Yeah, it'd be
invite you to
fun.
come and do that.
Yeah, it's just like to have like an information, presentation, maybe show film, and that's always a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thinking somewhere, say, like the village store in Albany or Morgan or
Mhm.
other central places where communities come together.
Yeah.
It'd be really interesting.
Good, you're hired.
I
You
should
should
be a
organize it.
publicity person. But it would be really interesting for that to be a topic. And I know a lot of the general stores are doing community-based events.
Mhm. Oh, okay.
And
Little meeting place.
they do music and things like that, which is great.
Mhm.
But how cool to have something that is different
Mhm.
and important.
I think one of the challenges up here too is that the percentage of childbearing families in the Northeast Kingdom is rather small, you know, and so I often get that, well, that I've passed those days, kind of, you know, so there's a lack of interest in regards to the older generations.
No more.
Yeah, so it's, you know, there's a little bit of a challenge in that way to just find where the interests lie and where these families are, and you know.
Yeah. What about the homeschooling population?
Yeah, I don't know how organized they are to, you know, even contact them.
Yeah.
That's a good thought, though. Yeah.
Yeah, I would bet that there are lots of small groups of people who are well organized, but who again are not publicly organized. I think one of the things up here is that we have a challenge geographically, but we have a challenge communicating too. That somehow we have these pockets of fantastic information that it's hard to share.
Yeah, and it's like unawareness, you know, like you know, people maybe have the similar thoughts and they're all thinking about doing something similar, but they don't even know that they exist to even come together to join. But, you know, I don't know if we're trying to organize a nurturing program or a postpartum care program, and with Christine Moore-de-Ortiz and a bunch of others, and just to help women, you know, no matter where they've given birth, obviously, but women in the kingdom with postpartum recovery and you know, challenges that they might be facing, and organizing a systematic way of being able to help them. I believe it's going to be called NEK Nurtures.
Yeah, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, that's kind of solves the, you know, that's helping take care of that, the postpartum group, you know, just to help them get back on their feet and
Is that going to be in Newport?
I think based in Newport, yeah.
Cool. When's that going to start?
Well, we're still in the process of putting it together with the help of a community organizer. I think, I hope I'm explaining it properly. Yeah.
But in the next couple of months?
We've been meeting once a month, of just about, to work on it, come up with a program, and a, you know, brochure, that kind of thing. And
when that program starts, because we're just about out of time now, this goes really fast, would you and somebody else from that group be willing to come back?
Oh, I'm sure they would.
Because that would be a fabulous
Yeah,
show
I think
to
that
do.
would be great. That's kind of dropping Christine's name off so
You
that
mean
you...
Colleen?
I mean Colleen. No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean that. Colleen Moore-de-Ortiz, yeah.
Colleen's here regularly.
Yeah, she is involved with lots of things. But,
Yeah.
So it was, you know, a bunch of us thought about it, but I think she's one
That
of the
would be
instigators,
great,
the
and
main drive behind it.
It could make such a difference to so many.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to be so isolated.
Yeah. So,
Well, on that note, we do have to stop for today. So we'll leave it that you and Colleen or whoever else will come back when this group starts.
yeah, that would be fun.
Great, and thank you for coming.
All right. Thank you.